How do I proceed now that Mom has covertly changed my wedding cake order without my knowledge? Post from September 26, 2023. My fiancé and I are getting married this autumn, and my mother is really upset over the cake. Overall, we favored dessert bars or cheesecake to cakes. My mother insisted on a tiny cake for us to cut. We compromised and got bids. Before we paid, she thought that simply a cake for us and no guest was tacky, so we got a sheet cake. We were annoyed because she did that, advised it, so we gave up and made tiered miniature cheesecakes as intended. My mother has held onto items for 6 months. She then sought a groom's cake. Fiancé didn't want one. She replied it was just a groom's cake by name and not his preferences when I told her. She wouldn't give up, so I told her no several times. All right. This week. I received a text yesterday indicating she paid for the order at the bakery. My failure to name her in those communications made me suspect. When I called the bakery today, they apologized profusely. Mom decorated a multi-tiered groom's cake with fillings, flowers, and more. Cheesecake remains, but I fear it will look absurd next to a wedding cake. Now what should I do? She doesn't know I know. I'm mad and hurt. I know it's cake, but that's not the idea. After I answered no, she broke many rules behind my back. Am I a breedzilla for denying her traditional wedding cake? A relevant comment. Explain why she should have cake at your wedding. Remove the cake from the order and call it a day. Set a password for future vendors to prevent unauthorized changes. Boop. Everyone I've talked to has either paid for the wedding or said it's not her cake. I'm divided because they pay. But they're changing history without my knowledge. Probably more unhappy about the trust betrayal than the cake. Comment, it's more than a cake, it's a violation of your wishes. Cancel her order and password protect any wedding accounts. You marry your husband, not her. Oop. Exactly. The biggest disappointment is the confidence violation. Since she paid in full, I'll call tomorrow to cancel and get a refund. I think she did it to appear clever. Comment 3 asks the bakery to make more and smaller cheesecakes. Possibly a smaller, non-wedding groom's cake. Avoid telling her you did this. Put a password on the order at the bakery so it can't be changed once you've made adjustments. She feels she's cheated you. If she checks, the password will prohibit further changes. If she brings another cake, tell staff to store it. Do not remove it from the rear. Thank you for your advice. Oop. Change the cake to more cheesecakes is smart. I never thought I'd be a Redditor and password protect my wedding. Updated 3 months later, December 30th, 2023. Hello again. Thanks to everyone who gave my first post suggestions. My new husband and I enjoyed the most relaxed honeymoon without family pestering us. When I posted it, deposits and commitments prevented cancellation, therefore the wedding went forward. To clarify, my parents paid for the wedding, but my husband and I made it plain multiple times that we did not expect or require them to pay for everything. I won't justify my mother's behavior. My dad said it was our wedding, and we could do whatever we wanted. Naturally, the cake was an exception. She had offered cheesecake if we wanted it. My spouse and I laughed at everyone's suggestions. Cake handling. I wanted to surprise my mother by calling the bakery and asking for an outlandish cake design that highlighted my husband's hobbies. Consider the groom's cake. After several days of deliberation, I understood that my need for tiny gratification might destroy my relationship with my mother, which had never been so strong before wedding planning. She was wrong and acted like a child. Even though I'm the child in the relationship, I wanted to act like an adult to keep it going. The moral high ground. I told my parents why this experience and others during wedding planning were uncomfortable and inappropriate. Poor results. A series of texts from my mother refused to accept responsibility or understand that I was furious not because she spoiled my wedding by buying a cake, but because she went behind my back knowing it would surprise and hurt me on my wedding day. Multiple times I tried to ignore the real issue, but failed. She apologized for the cake that upset my husband and me to stop the conversation. Despite her belief, this was neither an apology or the major issue. I approved moving the groom's cake to lunch the day before the wedding. I couldn't stand to press the issue a week before the wedding with everything else on my plate. I let go of the rope before the wedding to focus on organizing the perfect one. Our wedding party and coordinator did a great job of separating me from my mother on the big day. My communication with her since has changed considerably, lowered to gain much-needed space. We will have tough conversations, but I want to spend time with my new spouse and go to treatment. Weddings, man, they drive people crazy. Oh, and the cheesecakes were popular. Relevant remarks. Mrs. Neville Bartos. Glad you enjoyed your honeymoon and had the day you wanted. Unfortunately, this wasn't your dynamic with. Your mother never apologized or admitted fault. I'd remember that for future major events, children, etc. And plan accordingly. Oop. Okay, yes, I discussed disrespecting boundaries and losing faith in life events throughout our talk. She didn't comprehend me and kept looking at the cake instead of the overall picture. 1 year later, November 3rd, 2024, I'm returning to explain how my mother changed my wedding cake order without notifying me. People have asked for an update, and I've seen people with comparable family dynamics get engaged. I've told them everything, but I must post it online. After a year, I realize how much I love my wife and our life together, but having a traditional wedding was a huge mistake. I'm disappointed to learn that my wedding day memories don't include how much I adore my now husband or my excitement for our future. However, my mother and the potential explosion worried me. If you're engaged, have family issues, or if you're not sure about spending a lot on a wedding, consider this another loud voice. Elope or marry in court. No tough visitors, do whatever, but avoid family strife at all costs. I wish I had eloped abroad like I planned. Unfortunately, I've decided and must accept it. I omitted to mention in my prior posts that my relationship with my mother immediately and irreparably deteriorated since I had gotten engaged, though I knew she was a lot. I had no idea what I was getting into. If I could go back in time, I would have stopped wedding planning when insanity started. The cake was the final straw in the turmoil. Notifying everyone she knew about our engagement was the biggest hit. My husband shared the proposal photos with her less than 10 minutes after telling my parents he planned to propose, noting on how big I looked. Still ruined for me, and I informed a family member who complimented my attractiveness at a pre-wedding function that she had gained weight. She tried to disrupt my first glance on my wedding day and seemed upset over being excluded. She ruined my first look since my wedding planner wouldn't let her in. The wedding revolved around how she had no say and I was the immature leader. We still talk, but I'm careful what I say. She never apologized for her stress and hurt. I don't see it till she changes drastically. Story lesson: embrace the excitement of being engaged. But honestly, consider whether someone in your life will make wedding planning misery. If you have such a character, learn how to handle it and set boundaries. Perhaps elope for extremely strange families. Oop, I should have referred to the previous 2 entries because the terminology was deceptive. Writing was meant to warn other engaged couples in a similar scenario. Learn from my errors. If little issues are ignored, drama may quickly build and permanently damage relationships. Managing family issues throughout wedding planning. Okay, fair enough. I've seen so many couples experience family concerns early in the wedding planning process, so I wanted to relate how, a year later, one day strained my family connections and wasn't worth it. Yes, I regret not addressing it sooner and spotting the red flags. Hindsight is 20/20, and reality may be more complex than written. Next, the second story. I was embarrassed in the rain at a wedding without an invitation while my girlfriend was there. Am I overreacting? Original post today, my 24-year-old partner, Eric, and I were invited to one of his oldest classmates' wedding. Our save-the-date invitation to Eric and Vicky arrived months ago. We were invited to the service, breakfast, and evening celebration. Our RSVP asked about our breakfast meal preferences, which we replied years ago. It was a great gift from the bride and groom, especially because I had never met them and Eric was just close to the bride. Since none of us drives, I booked Airbnb and train tickets for PS60 each for the wedding, which is a few hours away. We paid £90, which is a lot considering we don't make much money, but because they invited us to the complete wedding, we felt it was impolite to decline. I bought a new gown because I didn't have anything formal that fit the bride's color preferences. Be appropriate. With Christmas approaching, it was challenging, and I had to be very frugal in November to make it work. It cost nearly twice as much as eating out, drinking, or buying clothes. We attended the beautiful event with a beautiful bride and an emotional atmosphere. For some reason, weddings make me nervous, so I didn't eat before, thinking the 4-course breakfast would be enough. Right after the ceremony, we proceeded to drinking and dining area. We were near the back of the facility entrance queue, so half the attendees had sat down. Eric's name was on the seating arrangement, so we went over. No place settings for me. No table chairs were available when Eric discovered his name. I asked an usher whether there was a mistake after Eric sat down. Waved over the bride since he wasn't sure. Though we had never met, she seemed kind. Before she spoke, "Not you the brunch invitation was for. Reception, service. You can return later." This was in front of most of the visitors who had already sat in a large room with 140 chairs. This usher suggested I visit the pub. Eric was unsure what to do and didn't want to cause a disturbance, so he remained silent. My humiliation has never been greater. Rain was pouring when I left. I didn't bring an umbrella because the wedding was indoors. Because I was in the country, I had to walk 20 minutes to reach elsewhere. The usher suggested a pub where the other guests were, so I kept walking, but my shoes were uncomfortable. Fully wrecked and wet. December was frigid, and I was dressed for a wedding. My bar visit began at 2 p.m. to discover merrymakers drinking heavily in bridal robes. I was uncomfortable addressing them as strangers, yet they were cordial. The reception was the only invitation, so they encouraged me to sit with them and discuss the service. One of them showed me their invitation, confirming they were evening guests. No service, breakfast, or dietary needs were mentioned. It looks I'm alone, an invited guest who was denied full event admission. I ate with them since I was hungry, but they left at 4 p.m. to prepare. As a foreigner, I didn't think it was smart to ask to join them, but I'd never been to this town and just knew Eric. Being removed around 1:30 p.m., I was asked to wait until 7:30 p.m. when the reception began. I left. I wanted to go home because I felt unwanted and despised. The evening will start without me in 30 minutes, but I can't leave knowing half the guests saw the bride ask me that. Exchanged my tomorrow train ticket. And now, returning alone. Eric didn't react to my text. I'm devastated after being evicted 6 hours ago and holding back tears. I don't know if the invitation was a mistake or if I was intended to know that it was solely for Eric, as it was addressed to both of us, inquired our dietary preferences, and specifically stated that we were invited to the whole wedding. I regret not attending the nighttime event, but I'm exhausted. I have terrible hair and makeup. My shoes aren't wearable. I'm freezing and barefoot on a dirty floor. I feel silly and messy. Have I erred? I feel fucked over and angry that Eric didn't defend me or leave the lunch with me. I think his inability to execute under pressure is more likely than malice. Never have I attended a wedding where you invite a +1 by name but don't involve them as much as the other half. Nobody else at the wedding saw it. I don't know how it's personal since I've never met them. I'm distraught and can't. Today was strange. If this happened, what would you do? I was turned away from a wedding halfway through. Am I overreacting to pain? Edit. This went considerably bigger than intended. Your support has helped me move from a wobbling wet mess to a cackling harpy with my enormous glass of wine. I enjoy how you folks speak up. Eric may still be at the party as it's almost bedtime. Knowing how terrible things were, I felt better going home. Karma stinks, and when they fall, we rise. Going to bed. I'll plan my next steps in the morning after sleeping on that. Many people say I should dump Eric, but I've never considered it. I was mostly upset with the bride and maid of honor, who may have been involved. Eric will be home tomorrow, so we'll discuss. After drinking since midday, he may be an imbecile rather than an arsehole, so I want to hear his bit. Regardless, no snap decisions will be taken. I'll attempt to return and update. Everyone, thanks for your 3 important comments. To be, the bride, which I don't use, and Eric, who is harsh, made blunders. Can't believe he didn't join you. The hell was he thinking? Had he dated the bride or her sister? Oopie. Funny you mentioned that. His ex is maid of honor. Before reading her name in the wedding brochure, we had no idea she was coming. However, their animosity is such that she would have removed him if she could. Update. Basically, I visited my boyfriend's oldest school acquaintance, wedding, and was kicked out of the wedding breakfast immediately. My lover attended the wedding. The response to my initial post surprised me, so thank you to everyone who sent advice and encouragement. I was distressed when I commented, but after an hour of sipping wine and reading your responses, I felt better. Last post had some confusing points that I wanted to explain. Our weddings in the UK are different from those in the US. Tradition calls for a ceremony. Despite its name, a wedding breakfast is a 3-course afternoon meal followed by speeches and a disco-themed evening celebration. People usually invite mainly family and close friends to the ceremony and breakfast, then many people to the evening reception. It's odd to invite someone to the ceremony and reception but not the breakfast because they'll be alone for 6 hours. After talking to friends and co-workers since last weekend, I understood what transpired was a major etiquette violation. Eric and I live together, date for a year and a half, and are close. He had no love history with Marie, the bride, but they went to school together from 4 to 10 and have maintained in touch as pen pals and Facebook friends. He hadn't seen her in almost 2 years until the wedding. There was no phone signal. Location. We were upset when we came for the ceremony because the wedding had a hashtag we couldn't tweet about without signal. This matters later. Helen, the maid of honor, was Eric's ex-girlfriend, which we discovered at the ceremony. They dated for 3 years till she cheated and left. They avoid one other due to animosity. Proceed to the update. To return home, I took the train right after the ceremony. The train was where I penned my first post. I got home. I told my parents everything, and they were unimpressed and surprised that Eric hadn't joined me, like most people here. My mother hugged me, took me to the bath, and poured me wine, and I tried to relax and forget my horrible day. Eric hadn't responded, so I texted him to say I got home safely and would see him tomorrow. Eric replied at 9 p.m., asking if I meant home or the Airbnb we booked near the performance. I explained, and he said, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Love you so much." I didn't know what to make of that because the day had been a mess, so I drank some wine, watched a Disney movie, and went to bed. Since I hadn't heard from Eric, I expected him to arrive around lunchtime, so I got up early and started wrapping Christmas presents. At 8 a.m., I heard a key in the door, and there was Eric, still in his wrinkling suit, red eyes and deathly expression. After I left, Eric was furious with Marie. He had frozen like a deer in headlights when she ordered me to go, and was kicking himself for not doing the right thing. About 10 minutes later, Marie turned back and said, "Oh, a few people haven't shown up. Get Vicky to return, we now have room for her." Well, never mind, she didn't want to be here anyway was garbage and made Eric feel horrible. He smirked and endured the formal, sit-down dinner, knowing I'd return later. Eric was the only non-family member listed in Marie's father's speeches, and everyone could tell he was unhappy I wasn't there to experience it. Texted him at 6 p.m. I attempted to tell him I was leaving but failed. I only received his text at 9 p.m. after 5 minutes of road walking for a signal. His ex Helen was always very lovely, asking where I was, why I didn't want to go to the party, and if I was shy. She had a wicked look in her eye, as if she'd succeeded. Given their strained relationship, Eric was furious that Marie had not told us she was the maid of honor until we arrived. I'm not sure Helen caused the seating issue. Even if she was, Marie was equally responsible for enabling it. Eric survived the event and returned to his Airbnb alone. He slept little, furious at Marie and Helen. The man left around 4:30 a.m., fucking with us and not supporting me. He arrived at our place early to catch the first train home. He didn't apologize or understand how terrible things were for me. He felt more ashamed and disappointed by his oldest friend. He is ending all contact with Marie. So yes, Eric saw the whole thing that way. I was upset because he hadn't considered my feelings or being kicked out of the wedding. Even though he was kept warm, dry, and fed despite the discomfort. Being the girlfriend and getting soaked in the rain, feeling ashamed, etc., is worse than your girlfriend being pulled from an event, so we spoke. I explained why I was offended and why his behavior was inappropriate. He can be a lemon, and this seems to be one of those times he allowed the world to wash over him and stood by. He has not apologized, and his actions have destroyed me. Not sure whether he knows what he did wrong. It's not a deal breaker for me. Despite being a burden, it stands. A great Christmas awaits. After a long autumn of hard work, all I want is to get back to the wonderful times before this fuck-up, and I don't want to think about it anymore. Many of you will chastise me for this, but we are still together. This is a major problem in his record, yet I won't break up with him. He needs a lot of extra credit to pass this year, to use a poor example, so I urge him to try harder now. Not an ultimatum. If he commits to improving our relationship, I'll put this behind us. I'll leave if he doesn't. Though I love him, he must support me and understand my struggles. I regret not giving you the triumphant breakup news you wanted, but I want us to. Enjoy a nice Christmas together. Not ruling anything out if things don't improve, but I'd like to give him another chance to prove our connection matters. Eric returned home the next day. Did we talk? We're together. Top comment. Toggle _. Considerations. Why didn't he grab you when his phone call failed if Marie stated you could stay 10 minutes after you left? If Marie stated you could stay 10 minutes after leaving, why didn't he? Find a signal 5 minutes after his call failed. Even though you were 5 minutes away at 9 p.m., why didn't he try to call you again? Relevant remarks. I own it now. Many of you will chastise me for this, but we're still together. Yes, that matters most. You kept him. I can't say much about dragging you over coals since you'll have to live with this selfish, conceited carpet. Would emphasize the point better than other situations where he abandons you on the road because he's unhappy at how they treated him. Throw the switches right, he didn't follow up, drive down the road, or leave in disgust. He kept thinking about his injured sentiments. You have a bright future. Oop. I've given him a deadline for major progress in a few areas of our relationship if he wants to keep us together. If not, I'm leaving. If he makes a big mistake before then, I'll depart. Just giving him one more chance to prove it's worth staying. Please do so and click the notification bell to receive more upsetting real-life experiences